Okay, the West African Hub is made up of researchers from Ghana, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. And Nigeria is the most populous country in the sub-region and indeed of all of Africa. So you cannot do any meaningful research without, including Nigeria. Sierra Leone was chosen because it has just emerged from more than a decade of conflict, and it presents interesting contrasts as well as similarities to other West African countries. Ghana is a much smaller country, but as I say, it has had a number of firsts. It was the first sub-Saharan African country to do this, to gain independence, etc. It has, for almost 2 decades now, implemented a stable democracy, etc., which makes it interesting and also a good case study to understand what this context means for women's empowerment. My name is Takyiwaa Manuh, and I'm the convener of the West African Hub. Now, in the West African Hub, we have had a number of projects as part of the overall Pathways RPC. One of these is on interrogating policy discourses and practice on women's empowerment in Ghana, which explore the role of institutions in providing the context, policy, frameworks, and policies for women's empowerment in Ghana. And the methods used included a study of the main governmental agency charged with women's empowerment, which is the Ministry of Women's and Children's Affairs, and then a selection of multilateral and bilateral agencies in Ghana, including the UNDP and the UN system in general, the World Bank, CEDA, and some selected NGOs. And the study methods combined an analysis of policy documents with interviews of policy actors. A second project in Ghana was on changing representations of women in popular culture, which used an analysis of song tests, textual analysis workshop, field work among both consumers and producers of music, and a song competition and launch to understand the ways in which women are represented in popular music and how you go about challenging the often disempowering representations that emerge. A third study was on changes and continuities in women's everyday lives in Ghana, which combined a survey of 600 women in 3 regions of Ghana with in-depth interviews of 3 generations of women. And the focus of the study was on education, work, decision-making, access to institutions, autonomy in relationships with significant others, and associational lives. So that was Ghana. In Sierra Leone, there were 3 projects: Women and Local Governance in Sierra Leone, which tried to do a kind of track or trace what has happened to women, and it has a subtitle on grassroots politics, looking at what women are doing to take on institutions and in the process, to change laws and policies relating to them. The second study was on policy discourses on women's empowerment in Sierra Leone, which was very much like the interrogating policy discourses and practice on women's empowerment in Ghana. And a third and important study was on the implementation of UN Resolution 1325 in post-war Sierra Leone, which is still ongoing. In Nigeria, there were 2 projects. One was on changing narratives of sexuality in Nigeria, which did a focused case study of a popular artist, a woman called Anita Hogan, and some exposés involving her as a kind of an entry point to discuss a much larger discourse. It also involved watching videos from Nollywood with young Nigerian women to understand their changing perceptions. And then a second study in Nigeria related, of course, to both the Ghana and Sierra Leonean case study was on tracking changes in conceptions of empowerment, of women's empowerment in Nigeria. So, what have we found from these studies? Overall, I would say that we have sought to understand how change occurs in women's lives, and our different takes have shown that there are many different avenues for change, and that while the state is an important avenue, and especially in our context, a most important one, it is by no means the only avenue for change. And we realize that often in policy discourses, popular culture is completely discounted. It doesn't exist, and yet perhaps it interacts with, and it's a genre that so many people relate to. You know, they much more than policy discourses, which is really up there. It's not that it doesn't, policies do not affect people, but it does so in so many indirect ways, whereas popular culture is something that people engage with on a daily basis, and it does shape their perceptions, as the interviews bring out. One of the religion is ubiquitous across Africa and in West Africa, whether we're looking at the Christian variant in all three countries, but particularly in Ghana, or also the Muslim variant, which exists in both Sierra Leone and Nigeria. And I think our findings on religion are interesting, but also troubling. In the older literature, there is a lot which is made about, a lot is written and said about women's very rich associational life in West Africa, in markets, in communities. And yet, the survey of 600 women, in the survey of 600 women, the religious dimension of associational life appeared to be the most important and salient for most women. Having said that, though, it is interesting to understand that religion has so many uses. You know, you could almost say that women use religion instrumentally. It may be that because in West Africa, because of militaristic tendencies and the absence of politics for many years. When I say the absence of politics, I'm not suggesting that there was no politics, but there were no avenues for people to express themselves or to participate in religion. So religion, in politics, I'm sorry. So religion has become almost like a venue or a forum for self-expression, it provides avenues for women's leadership, for public speaking, and it is a form of social security, both spiritually and temporally. And as some people cynically said, when you die, they also give you a good burial. For some women in particular locations in Ghana, for instance, immersion in religion also becomes a way of making, it's a form of social capital, you know, which can advance people, which is not to discount the often very conservative teachings on religion in both the Christian and Muslim variant in the sub-region. In much of the revivalist charismatic religions that have emerged now, the whole theme of women's submissiveness to men is very dominant, you know, and also just a certain, even as you are urged to prosper, there is also a certain fatalism that is embedded in it. And then, of course, the Muslim variant in Nigeria, you have the reintroduction of Sharia in the north and north-central part of Nigeria, which has stressed the conservative aspects of Islam instead of its more liberational aspects, you know. So religion came out very big. And all of this, you know, the issue of popular culture, religion, work has been and remains an important pathway for women, but it is also an ambiguous pathway because you know, I think that the RPC has stressed the issue of decent work, and in West Africa it is an axiom that every woman has to work, and yet the work that many women are engaged in is precarious, does not guarantee them an income, and this is where the role of the state comes in again, you know, because women are having to fend for themselves to you know, continuously imagine new enterprises for themselves. As one fails, you know, they don't fold their arms, they embark on another one. But the precariousness of it and the ways in which it reflects in other indicators of life is important. Education, and you know, we have just had the UN Summit, the Millennium Development Goals Summit, and Ghana is one of the countries that is supposed to be on track on many of the goals, 5 out of 8. But when you read carefully, you find that it is not quite that. And MDG 2 and MDG 3 on education and women's empowerment particularly. And yet, the results from our survey, you know, says yes, you know, yes to education, but education is not enough, especially education at certain levels. Both primary and secondary education are not enough. And we may even venture to say at tertiary level, in an economy that does not generate employment, and Ghana in particular, and to some extent both Nigeria and Sierra Leone as well, have had jobless growth for decades now. And it means therefore that policymakers, at the same time that, you know, education is being touted, the MDG 3 does not deal with employment, you know. It's important that we do guarantee employment, otherwise you have an education, supposedly you have choice, but what is this choice about? So that is a very interesting and important findings. So what we are saying is that it is important to identify these different arenas, these different pathways, and to be quite clear in our minds about which arena we choose to intervene in and seek to influence, and for what purpose, you know. So it's about being aware and being selective, and clearly the state has to be engaged with all the time, both to fulfill its rhetorical commitments to women's empowerment, which is de rigueur. On October 15th in Nairobi, the African Women's Decade 2010 to 2020 will be launched. We have seen the launches of many decades, platforms, programs in Africa. The challenge is how to move it from launch to reality in people's lives, you know, and therefore the role of the state remains predominant. But alongside it, we must not forget women's own initiatives, which need to be supported, you know, and also to be moved, you know, because the discourse of economic empowerment is very powerful in this region, and yet, even assessing, let me take Ghana's example, the recent assessment of Ghana's fulfillment of the MDGs, even on the gender equality, you know, Ghana is trailing, and Ghana and West Africa in general are trailing East and Southern Africa, for example, on indicators of gender equality such as participation in decision making and in politics generally, you know. So we have learned a lot of lessons, and I believe that it is, you know, we can engage usefully with both with policymakers at different levels and also with women themselves.